Eat your heart out, SeaWorld. The NFL is releasing Dolphins left and right. Plus, the coaching carousel might have come to a halt, but the QB carousel is just getting started. We've got all the news and notes right here coming your way on the Grey Duck NFL Show. Welcome once again to the Grey Duck NFL Show. I'm your host, Josh Kolodziejski, and we are a week removed from the Super Bowl. The Seattle Seahawks beating the New England Patriots. We talked all about that last week, and then we took an extra day off, and we'll go from here about 2 shows a week, but with nothing else really happening after the Super Bowl, thought it best just to kind of enjoy the long weekend and come back for you here on a Tuesday. We're recording this on Monday night, and that is a good thing because if we had recorded it on Sunday, we would have had to trash the whole show because the Miami Dolphins just made a series of roster cuts that can change the landscape of the NFL for 2026 and beyond. 4 players gone. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about why they made that moves and what other moves might be branched off of this move. We'll also talk about some other news, including Travis Hunter with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has a new role. They announced, and we'll dive into what that means and what that means for going forward and the hindsight when we look at the number 2 overall pick that Jacksonville traded up to get Travis Hunter. Does this change how valuable that player is? We will see, and we'll discuss and then go through some quick coordinator hires that happened over the last week or so, with some of these last head coach vacancies having been filled with Arizona and with Las Vegas, and then Seattle needing to make replacements because their head coach went to Las Vegas. We'll get it all sorted out because the coaching carousel, like we said at the top, has mostly come to a complete halt, barring any surprises moving down the road. But the quarterback carousel is just getting started. And we're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about which teams need a quarterback in 2026, which teams don't. And based off of that information, which quarterbacks could be available for the teams that have these vacancies or these needs, whether that be in the draft, whether that be in free agency, or whether that be via trade. I'll make my predictions. You can laugh at them. You can agree with them. But we'll have them for you here at the end of the show. Let's get right into it with the Miami Dolphins. 4 guys cut, 2 with All-Pro honors in the past, or at least Pro Bowl honors in the past, and then 2 lesser-known guys. But we'll go through the names because they have a new general manager. They have a new head coach in Jeff Hafley. They're bringing in a ton of guys from the Green Bay organization, and it seems like the new philosophy is slash, and let's just rebuild this thing from the ground up, because gone is Tyreek Hill. Gone is Bradley Chubb. James Daniels, Nick Westbrook-Akine, all of those guys no longer Miami Dolphins as of Monday morning. And the main reason you do that is to cut cap space, which they did. They were severely over the cap at $17+ million, I think is what I saw from over the cap. These 4 moves save you $56 million in cap space. So now you are back under the cap, and you are able to make moves, and you are able to rebuild. It would have been hard as a first-year general manager to come in to this team, try to remake it after 2 poor years, but not have the financial wherewithal to do that, and to not really have any resources available to you. So making these moves was a tough necessity, but I think the Miami Dolphins' future is probably better off for it. And it also goes to show just kind of how much of a disaster, especially the end of the Chris Grier era in Miami was, because Tyreek Hill, 30-plus-year-old receiver now, signed a pretty big extension a couple of years ago, given to him by Chris Grier. And with that extension, obviously, they didn't predict that a devastating knee injury would perhaps change his future outlook as an NFL wide receiver. And that injury, of course, being that torn ACL, that dislocated knee that he suffered, I believe it was a Thursday night football game. But just a devastating injury, not only in terms of the structural damage that it caused, but a very visceral injury for those of us that saw it on the television, or at least saw the aftermath of it on the television. And what does that mean for his future? He could be the same guy, but if you're Miami and you're $17 million over the cap, can you take that bet? Can you make that move? Can you afford to keep him on your roster and still be able to rebuild around him? Because Tyreek Hill is a guy whose calling card is speed. And that's not to say that the other aspects he has as a wide receiver are all bad. Most of them are pretty good. He's a pretty good route runner, good hands, great yards after catch ability. And he uses his speed to stretch the field both vertically and horizontally. It's not like he's just a deep threat, go gets the ball. He can run routes over the middle of the field. So he does all of that. But he's an undersized wide receiver that now, because of a big knee injury and also because of the natural aging process, might not have all that same speed that made him so spectacular, and he might be a more ordinary wide receiver for the rest of his NFL career. I think there is a very good chance that is the case. So I think assessing the risk there, that his value has plummeted, that he is no longer worth the price to pay him, and also because you have a strong wide receiver room still. The Dolphins last year, after Tyreek Hill got injured, their wide receiver room, their passing game looked pretty much the same. Malik Washington really, in his second year, stepped up and made a huge name for himself in Miami as their number 2. And then, of course, Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane, who obviously is a running back, but is used a lot as a receiver, more often than almost any other player. So you can afford to move on from Tyreek Hill in both a financial sense and in a sense of production. Because I think a lot of that production is still going to be there in the conglomerate of the Dolphins wide receiver room. And yes, that includes even with Nick Westbrook-Akine leaving the team as well. A guy that I think, for me, was a promising signing for the Miami Dolphins moving into 2025. I was interested in what Mike McDaniel was going to do with this guy who is kind of in the same mold as Alec Pierce, and they both kind of came to the stage at the same time in 2024 and made their biggest plays that year, with Westbrook-Akine being this 8-touchdown machine that wouldn't have a high volume of targets and catches, but he would catch contested balls and he would make explosive plays just like Alec Pierce has done over the last 2 seasons. And you assumed that would carry over into his new deal with the Miami Dolphins. That was not the case. For whatever reason, it just did not work out, and he was not the same player that he was with Tennessee in 2024, which is not a Pro Bowl player, but is still a valuable sort of wide receiver to have as a depth guy. But even as a depth guy, his results in production this year were underwhelming and disappointing. And now, just being a deadweight guy, he's gone. And he has hit the free agency pool. Bradley Chubb, maybe a little bit more of a curious one, because by and large, while aging, is still a guy that is playing good football defensively. I think because of the age, you have to say he's probably on the downside of his career, and a lot of times those downsides hit a sudden cliff and just drop off dramatically, and then you've kind of got the same issue that we were talking about with Tyreek Hill. Can you take that risk? Can you have a gamble where you're hoping that your highly paid superstar edge rusher does not all of a sudden hit the age cliff and become a complete non-factor on your defense, which is probably in the most transition, and even before Jeff Hafley was hired in the 2025 season, was going through a lot of transition. And we saw the improvement of Kenneth Grant, who was a disaster early in the year and came into his own as the season went on. We saw Anthony Weaver kind of make the most out of a mess of personnel. And now we get to see Jeff Hafley, kind of make this defense in his own image and bring in the young guys he wants. And to also have the financial capital to do that. Because, like we said, it's a difficult task to rebuild a team that has kind of been as underwhelming as the Miami Dolphins has been the last two seasons. But it is even more difficult of a task when you have almost no resources to work with. Now they have the resources to work with, or at least a little bit. And James Daniels, another wide receiver, another offensive player, another free agency signing like Nick Westbrook-Akine between 2024 and 2025, that is now going to be gone. He was an interior offensive lineman for them, kind of a guy that you can flex to different spots. But Miami's offensive line without James Daniels actually had a decent showing last year. And again, the value now that you are providing us does not match the finances that we are giving you. So we are going to cut ties. We are going to save money. And we are going to open up some cap space. But are we so sure that the reason that they are opening up this cap space right now in particular is because they're going to make some big moves in free agency? I am hard-pressed to agree with that. I know a lot of free agents want to come to Miami, and we can talk about the NFLPA report card thing of it all, but they're typically one of the top destinations that free agents want to go to, and typically get A+ for coaches, obviously a new coach, but for ownership and for facilities and all of that, just being a desirable place. So we know people will want to come there, but we also know that Miami's top priority is figuring out what to do at quarterback this year. And it seems like an impossible task to mend what seems to me to be an irreparable relationship between the Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa. And with just some of the postseason press conferences and exit interviews, it does not seem like Tua is long for this Miami Dolphins roster. The problem is, another Chris Greer special, a major handicapping contract extension for a quarterback that has fallen off of a cliff and has just made puzzling decisions time and time again. A quarterback who used to be this accurate Brock Purdy sort of player and could distribute the ball to the playmakers that he needed to, but now for whatever reason just can't read the field well, might have to do with the concussions, and can't process what he needs to process as a quarterback quickly enough to make a high impact. And even the insiders, the NFL Network show with like Tom Pelissero and Mike Garofalo, they said that Tua Tagovailoa is not going to be back in Miami next year, no matter what. But if I'm a team trying to trade for Tua Tagovailoa, I might not exist because I don't think there are any teams that want to take on that contract, a major contract, and a contract that is going to handicap you for a couple of years at least, and that you're going to have to give up assets for. And maybe the Dolphins do something like what the Texans did with Brock Osweiler, where they attach a lot of draft compensation in order to get a team to take that contract. But I just don't think there's going to be any takers, especially everybody knowing your cap space and now seeing these moves knowing that your leverage in a trade is not going to be there at all, I think what these moves mostly do is open up the possibility that Miami will just straight up cut Tua Tagovailoa. And that is a different stance than I had waking up this morning. I thought that Tua was likely to be back with the Miami Dolphins no matter what, because I didn't think there was going to be a team that wanted to trade for him, and it would be unfeasible to cut him with what even pre-June 1st, post-June 1st designation does not matter. It would have been a significant dead cap hit that now you're already over the cap, and now you're spending even more money to get off of a quarterback who didn't live up to expectations. So you're spending even more money to not have a player if you were to cut him. But these 4 moves opened up about $56 million in cap space. And just going by the over-the-cap numbers for Tua Tagovailoa, they would eat $99 million in a cap hit for the 2026 season if they cut him before June 1st. So that covers, half of it, but it's a little bit more easier down the throat if we look at it with the post-June 1st designation, where it is now just a $67 million cap hit. Now you're almost there. You're $11 million away with the moves that you've made. Now you can do some restructurings. Simple as that. And you are both able to give yourself resources, probably maybe with more cuts or at least more restructures, to both build, probably first and foremost, your defense, but to build up your football team as a new general manager and a new head coach, and to also move on from the quarterback who has had such a tumultuous time with this team. These moves today open up that possibility, and I think they are A-plus decisions that are tough decisions to make, but were necessary decisions to make, because no team is going to take Tua in a trade. They might sign him as a free agent, so might as well just cut him and start building for the future with another quarterback. And when we get to our quarterback carousel segment, we can talk about the different options that they would have to replace Tua, whether that just be in the draft or an in-house option like Quinn Ewers. But they have options, some more expensive than others, and we will discuss those in a moment. But overall, an excellent job by Miami in biting the bullet this year, knowing, of course, even as a first-year general manager and head coach, you probably are going to be given a little bit of a leash. So you can have this bad year, or at least bad in terms of the names on paper. This year could still be good with whoever they put out there, depending on what exactly they can do as coaches to get their players ready for games. But you can afford to risk a really bad season where you eat all of your cap in that first year if you are a first-year general manager and head coach. So this is the time to do that, and then you open up cap space for years to come. Moving right along, let's quickly go to the NFLPA report card decision. The NFL announced last weekend that they had won a grievance against the NFL Players Association, and I don't know if it is really a win. Like, it seems like a pretty hollow victory, because what the grievance was that the NFL did not want the NFLPA to publicly publish the NFLPA report cards because the NFL says they're based on some pseudoscience and rigged data collection, yada, yada, yada. And the arbitrator said, okay, they can still take these surveys, they can still publish these report cards internally, but yes, we won't allow them to be published externally. But what does that do for you if you're an NFL owner? Is it just to get some of the heat off of you from the fan bases? Because if these report cards are still going around to other players in the NFL, which they are, and if these surveys are still going to happen, which they are, and which is all by the book now, which was not a part of this grievance, players are still going to know which places suck and which places don't. Which owners suck and which owners suck less. Because all owners pretty much suck. What facilities are good, which facilities aren't. Which team culture is good, which head coach is good, which team culture, which head coach is not. And even if, let's just say that it doesn't leak out, but I think there's a pretty high likelihood that every single year someone is somehow leaking this information to the general public anyway, and doing it in a way that doesn't leave any evidence that it came from the NFLPA, but it just kind of accidentally got sent out to some reporter. Wink, wink. Even if it doesn't leak out, I think we would still be able to get a pretty good idea as the media, as the public, of which teams are not able to attract free agents, just based on which free agents a team signs and the available money that it has. Like if you see that the Miami Dolphins are still bringing in a lot of guys for valuable contracts, for market value contracts, we're going to assume, yeah, it's probably still a pretty good culture there. They're probably still an A-plus team. So it seems a little bit of a ridiculous parading of the NFL to call this a victory, even though, yes, they did technically win a meaningless grievance. But good on you, Roger Goodell and NFL owners everywhere. You have just made it a little bit more difficult for the public to get their hands on information about how bad of a team you may or may not run, or good of a team that you may or may not run. So that was just a quick aside because we had brought up the NFLPA surveys while talking about this most recent Miami Dolphins story. And now we're going to move on to another part of Florida, a little bit north of Miami Beach. And that's going to be in Jacksonville, where the Jaguars released a statement saying that this year, 2026, Travis Hunter is going to be primarily a cornerback and will be a limited wide receiver. And, you know, part of you just kind of dies if you were hoping for this Shohei Ohtani sort of player in the NFL like I was. I thought it was possible. I thought it could happen. But I think it can still happen. One, because he's still going to be playing both ways. And when you have him in there on offense, you're going to want to have a decent package of plays designed for him so that you're not just wasting him in cardio out there. That doesn't mean he's going to get open on all of them or they're all going to work out, but he's going to be a focal point of the offense when he is out there. And they didn't say how limited he would be. But it still is a little bit of a bummer for all of us that watched him at Colorado play both ways and play both ways exceptionally. Come to the NFL, kind of struggle as a wide receiver for sure early on, and then get injured when he finally seemed to have figured it out as a wide receiver. And I think this is probably the right decision for now if it does lead to him becoming this Shohei Ohtani sort of player, this two-way superstar a couple years down the road, where he can be a superstar cornerback and superstar wide receiver, but now he just needs a full year perhaps to learn both of those positions. And maybe last year when he was mostly a wide receiver early on in the year, and then as the year went on, came in more at cornerback, maybe that was his wide receiver learning year, and this is going to be his cornerback learning year, learning the systems. And then maybe next year he puts it all together, or maybe he's just a cornerback for life now. And then if that's the case, that makes the trade for him look very, very bad. And it looks like Cleveland would have fleeced the Jacksonville Jaguars and probably would show some disconnect between the Jacksonville front office and the Jacksonville coaching and development staff. Because it seemed like the general managers and the front office really picked Travis Hunter with the thought that he would be a full-time cornerback and a full-time wide receiver, or as full-time as you can get, maximizing the amount of play at both of those positions. If it's just trading up for a cornerback, yeah, that deal looks worse. But I think it might be, hopefully for our sake as NFL fans, a way now to immerse Hunter in the defense like he was immersed in the offense at training camp last year. And now the offense and defensive system of this team becomes second nature to him so that you don't get hiccups procedurally. Because last year, on offense, Travis Hunter was looking back to Trevor Lawrence a lot of the time and was late to get off at the snap. Is that because he didn't know the snap count? Is that because he didn't know the can or the audible? Because he was consuming so much information that a lot of it kind of just went right through? I think that could have been the case. That's why I think it took so long for him to finally, in that game against the Rams overseas, he has a huge game, both as a defender and as a wide receiver, and gave you a glimpse of what that could look like. But I think they're going to get him immersed in the defense this year. And maybe next year they get him immersed in the offense if last year was kind of a blown year with the season-ending injury. But I think at the very least in 2028, he is going to be that full-time wide receiver, full-time cornerback sort of player. Or at least that's what I hope. And maybe I'm being too optimistic with that and a bit naive. But we all have dreams. Real quick, before we get to our quarterback carousel for tonight, we're going to discuss, or at least mention, the new faces and new places for assistant coaches around the NFL. A couple of shifts had been made at major assistant positions, those being offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. Brian Fleury, who was the tight ends coach of the San Francisco 49ers, is now the Seahawks offensive coordinator. Well, why is the Seahawks offensive coordinator job available? Well, it's because Clint Kubiak, of course, we learned last week, became the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. So that opened up the OC spot. He also took his quarterback coach with him to Las Vegas to be his offensive coordinator. That's Andrew Janocko, who is another, I probably butchered that name, but that's what we're going to go with for now. He is in a new place. He is with not a new person because he's still with Clint Kubiak. He's still directly under Clint Kubiak, but now he's going to be the offensive coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders under Clint Kubiak instead of the quarterback coach of the Seattle Seahawks under Clint Kubiak. So Fleury, the Seahawks OC, Janocko, the Raiders OC, and then the Browns have their Jim Schwartz replacement. Jim Schwartz, who's kind of just being paid to stew around, I guess. They don't want to release him from his contract, or at least I don't think they've released him from his contract, even though he said he's not going to be the defensive coordinator. And now they've hired Mike Rutenberg to be the defensive coordinator for Cleveland, and they are trusting something called Mike Rutenberg with the precious alloys and metals that are Myles Garrett, Mason Graham, and that whole Cleveland Browns defense. They're trusting him not to ruin it. So let's hope, especially if you're a Cleveland fan, that Rutenberg does not ruin it and that Todd Monken was not a massive mistake over Jim Schwartz because of the fallout that happened with Jim Schwartz after that. Those are our coaching updates. The coaching carousel about coming to a halt now, but like we said, the quarterback carousel just heating up. So, as we get into the meat and potatoes of today's show, let's just talk about some of these places that have quarterback openings or question marks. We go down the list. If you look at the NFC East, I would say not much there. Giants are going to give Jackson Dart another chance. Not saying that he was bad. That seemed like I was saying I was bad. That was the connotation that I see. I'm saying that they're going to obviously keep with him. The Cowboys obviously going to roll with Dak Prescott. continues to impress year in, year out. Philadelphia and Jalen Hurts. And then Washington in Jaden Daniels for his third season. We move to the NFC North, and I think there is one question mark here, and that is my Minnesota Vikings. What are they going to do with J.J. McCarthy? My personal preference is to let J.J. McCarthy have another year, but there's a lot of people in Minnesota and nationally saying that might not be the case, or at the very least, he's going to have some competition in training camp, even though he had a hot end to the season in the final 4 games, which was about half of his NFL career at that point. So Minnesota is a question mark, per reports, as to whether J.J. McCarthy will or will not be their quarterback next season. But Detroit with Goff, Green Bay with Love, and Chicago with Williams, probably not. Although at some point you would think that Detroit might surprise us and draft a quarterback first round to get ready for the departure of Jared Goff whenever that time comes. Atlanta, I assume, is going to stick with Michael Penix for another season. But they're probably going to get rid of Kirk Cousins. I think that was reported that he's likely to be released. Tampa Bay has another year left in Baker Mayfield. New Orleans rolling with second-year guy Tyler Shook. And Carolina had Bryce Young get them to a playoffs and get them pretty close to a playoff win. And he will be staying in Carolina. Finally, the NFC West, Matthew Stafford staying with the Rams. Sam Darnold staying with the Seahawks. Arizona is likely to move on from Kyler Murray, per a lot of reports. Their new head coaching staff, we thought maybe could ease some of the tension between Murray and the rest of the team, but it seems like that's not going to be the case, that the coaching staff might have their own guy in mind, so Kyler Murray probably out, which puts him into this vast pool of players that could be available that have starting quarterback experience that your team, if you are listed in these vacancies, might have a chance to turn to. AFC East, Josh Allen not going anywhere. Drake May not going anywhere. Tua, we mentioned, is going somewhere. The Jets don't want to run it back with either Tyrod Taylor, Brady Cook, or Justin Fields. I guarantee that, especially with Aaron Glenn on the hot seat. And then the Cleveland Browns, they have Shedeur Sanders. Do they want to upgrade that position this year, or do they want to give Shedeur another chance? I don't know. I am putting that in as a vacancy right now and putting that in as a question mark because nothing that Shedeur Sanders did, despite making the Pro Bowl, really blew me away throughout the course of last season on a consistent basis. And then Cincinnati obviously staying with Burrow. Pittsburgh and Aaron Rodgers seems like it's going to be run back, but I'm still putting him in the question mark category, and I'm putting Pittsburgh into the question mark category. Baltimore not moving on from Lamar Jackson. Indianapolis, I think they want Daniel Jones. Will they get Daniel Jones? That kind of makes them a little bit of a question mark for me as well. And then Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, Cam Ward, Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, all staying with their teams. Geno Smith, if he is with the Las Vegas Raiders, probably going to be serving a backup role. So just to recap, here are the teams that I said have vacancies. Minnesota, Arizona, vacancies or question marks. Minnesota, Arizona, Miami, the Jets, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, and Las Vegas. And just some names of quarterbacks that are going to be available either via trade or via the draft or via free agency. It's a big list. And most of these guys are probably going to be backups, but I thought I would just include them in case one team just misses out and has to settle for an experienced backup as their starting quarterback. So Daniel Jones, Russell Wilson, Marcus Mariota, J.J. McCarthy, Malik Willis, Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo, Kyler Murray, Jacoby Brissett, Mac Jones, Mitch Trubisky, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, Shedeur Sanders, Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson, Davis Mills, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith, Fernando Mendoza, and Ty Simpson. So we are going to try and match those quarterbacks with a potentially new partner. And let's get the first one out of the way because it's the easiest. The Las Vegas Raiders have the number 1 overall pick. They are going to select Fernando Mendoza, and Fernando Mendoza, I think, is going to be a day 1 starter in Las Vegas with Clint Kubiak, Ashton Genty, and hopefully, for Vegas' sake, a revamped offensive line. So that's one off the table already. I'll give you another one that I also think is going to go off the table and probably didn't even really need to go on the table, but I think we can discuss that it could be at least called into question, and that is Daniel Jones going back to Indianapolis. I think at the very least, if no extension can be reached, they're going to tag Daniel Jones. I think he's going to be back no matter what. Daniel Jones had his first real good season until he tore his Achilles, and we don't know how long it will take him to recover from that and how ready he will be for the start of the 2026 season. But you had a quarterback that showed he could run your offense. You're still bringing that head coach back. You're bringing most of that offense back as well. You're going to try to work out an extension before the franchise tag deadline. If no extension has been made or no progress has been made for an extension, then yes, you are franchise tagging Daniel Jones and having him for at least 1 year, and then also giving yourself more time to be the sole negotiator or the sole entity that could get Daniel Jones. You'd be the only one negotiating an extension with him. He wouldn't be a free agent, is what I'm trying to say. Pittsburgh, we're going to move on from for a second, because I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going back to Pittsburgh. I know that people in the league seem to have some sort of confidence that he is, but I just don't see it. I think there was a lot of baggage in that I think it was a Ty Dunn's article that detailed the breakup between Mike McCarthy and the Packers, and Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers specifically. And I think that is too much bad blood to have those guys paired up on a football team once again. I think they can easily get over that just in a personal way as acquaintances or as friends or whatever you want to call it. I think that's something that's easy to move on from, but I don't know if it's easy to move on from when you go back into that same exact setting. And both of these guys, now older and probably more stubborn, see the exact same things in each other that led to the divisiveness in 2018. I think the Steelers front office hopefully understands that. I hope Mike McCarthy understands that. And I think it should just be kind of a clean split and go from there and let Aaron Rodgers kind of be a free agent and choose where he wants to go for the second time in as many years. And where do I think Aaron Rodgers will go? Because he would obviously, if his name is on this list, be one of those guys that would get one of the starting jobs if he wanted to, if he didn't retire. And for the sake of this exercise, we're going to say that he's not retiring. And maybe it's too cliche, and maybe I'm not thinking this out enough, but it's got to be Arizona, right? Mike LaFleur, Matt LaFleur, brothers. There wasn't really a bad breakup between LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers. His grievances were more with the front office for drafting Jordan Love in 2020, and in Rodgers' view, trying to push him out and not give him enough help to make the team competitive. I don't think he had issues with Matt LaFleur. So does he go to another LaFleur brother who now has also very notably brought in Aaron Rodgers' favorite offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, to run his offense? I think that is telling, and I think at the very least that is a concerted effort by Arizona to lure Aaron Rodgers. And another thing is Arizona, is the perfect retirement place. Especially in the fall and winter, when everywhere else that you've been, after growing up in California, everywhere else you've been as a professional has been cold and frigid during this time. Frozen tundra of Lambeau Field, MetLife Stadium, Pittsburgh, all of those places not necessarily known for being the most comfortable, especially as we get into winter. Arizona is perfect in the winter. Like, I would suggest don't live down here in the summer and maybe make your decision after the 115-degree days have subsided. But like right now, it's like 60 degrees at nighttime in Arizona. And we are enjoying it. We have 6 months of enjoying it and then 6 months of dreading it. But the 6 months of enjoying it would get Aaron Rodgers, would be during the NFL season for the most part. September is a little bit hot too. So, could we see Aaron Rodgers go there? I think also the weapons are enticing for Arizona. I think they are sneakily a team that might be ready to compete next year, especially if Marvin Harrison Jr. gets healthy. Aaron Rodgers would have, and especially if they get a quarterback, obviously. And in this case, that would be Aaron Rodgers. And they have James Conner as a running back. And they have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson, who out of nowhere became a superstar wide receiver in the second half of the season after Marvin Harrison Jr. started to miss a lot of time. And, oh yeah, you also have Trey McBride, who just set the single season record for most receptions in a season by a tight end. That's a good amount of weapons. And the offensive line is not great, but it's also got pieces. And you're also a team with the number 3 overall pick. And are going to have Francis Mauigoa or Spencer Fano available to you to try and build up your offensive line. Because Vegas is obviously going quarterback. The Jets' offensive line is excellent. The only thing excellent about the Jets, it seems, is that offensive line. So they're going to try and fix the defense. That leaves you with the offensive lineman of your choice if you're Arizona. Or allows another team to try and trade up, break the bank, and give you more assets to get an offensive lineman. So that gives you one more piece to build around on the offensive line and to better protect Aaron Rodgers if he does decide to go there. And for the sake of this exercise, we are going to say that he is. So we've got Vegas and Fernando Mendoza, Indy and Daniel Jones, and now Arizona and Aaron Rodgers. Let's transition back here to Las Vegas because they could keep around Geno Smith, right? But it is an expensive contract that they're working on. And trading him or cutting him can help you alleviate a lot of that. It's not like a Tua Tagovailoa situation where it's going to handicap you significantly. Here, it can alleviate you of some of perhaps your financial woes. So it's probably in your best interest to trade or release Geno Smith so that you can build other pieces around a very broken Vegas Raiders team. You can have Aiden O'Connell as the backup. You can bring in another veteran backup. But I don't think you want to pay $35 million against your cap or whatever it is for Geno Smith to be sitting on the bench. You don't want that money invested into a backup quarterback, even if your starting quarterback is getting a rookie salary. It's still the most expensive rookie salary because he's going to be the number 1 pick. So Fernando Mendoza starts day 1. The Raiders, after selecting him, or maybe even before selecting him, trade away or release Geno Smith. That gives one team the opportunity to pick him up if they want, or he can just ride off into an anonymity forever. But I think the Minnesota Vikings would then go and get Geno Smith. And Geno didn't have a great year in Vegas, obviously. We all know that. But in 2024 and 2023, and I think even back to 2022, his EPA per dropback on throws of over 20 yards down the field was top 10 in each of those 3 seasons. This year it wasn't, but this year he also faced more pressure than almost anybody on those dropbacks. So he didn't have time to get rid of the football on throws of 20 plus yards down the field, which are going to take a little bit longer to develop. So I would be more inclined to say that he has not lost his deep ball prowess, and he probably still has that. And what do we know that Kevin O'Connell likes to do with his passing game? He likes to take the top off with Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, and isn't as concerned about the underneath in an intermediate game. He saves the running game for those sorts of gains and then likes to take the top off of defenses. So if you're going to bring in a quarterback to either take over for J.J. McCarthy or to compete with J.J. McCarthy, it would make sense that it would be a good deep ball thrower. And in that case, it would be Geno Smith. Now, we also saw Geno Smith make a lot of questionable decisions while with the Raiders that led to a lot of turnovers. So can you rein that back in? I don't know. But I think you bring in Geno Smith and he competes with J.J. McCarthy this offseason in training camp. And then if he wins that competition, it's likely because he's proven that last year was more of a fluke, or that it had more to do with the pieces around him than rather just him by beating out McCarthy. Or McCarthy beats him out and you've got a quarterback that is a veteran and reliable to sit on the bench. Meanwhile, your starting quarterback just beat out a former Pro Bowler. So for me, I think Geno Smith would be the perfect fit there in Minnesota, because right now for me, the biggest question is not going to be J.J. McCarthy's production, but it's going to be his injury history, and I want a solid guy that can start. And if he beats him out in training camp, let him start the whole season. But a guy that can start if J.J. McCarthy suffers a significant injury or even a little injury that keeps him out of the lineup for a couple of weeks, so we don't have to go back to like Carson Wentz or Max Brosmer, because that was a disaster. So Geno Smith to Minnesota. And we have right now Miami, New York, Cleveland, all left, along with Pittsburgh. Miami going to move on from Tua. We mentioned that all these moves today make that a strong likelihood that they're just going to cut him. So where does Tua go? If I am Aaron Glenn and I desperately need to keep my job, I need a quarterback that can hopefully give me a high floor at the very least, and that has been in control of offenses and has read the field at times better than other quarterbacks in the NFL. And while that wasn't Tua Tagovailoa in 2025, that was Tua Tagovailoa mostly in 2022, 2023, 2024. He was that guy that could process the field well. Because I am in a hot seat sort of year as Aaron Glenn. And I have Frank Reich as my offensive coordinator, who's worked with, Andrew Luck, Bryce Young, more of these pocket passers. Tua would fit that mold just as a left-hander. And if I think that I can get him to shake out of whatever habits forced him to make mistakes last season, if it wasn't originated from a series of concussions over the last couple of years, then I would think that Tua would be a pretty good option, especially since you have a good offensive line. You should be able to run the ball pretty well with, I assume, a franchise tag on Breece Hall and bringing back Braylon Allen. Not bringing him back, but him coming back from injury. That is a good two-headed punch that I thought was kind of very disappointing that Braylon Allen, not disappointing, but it was sad to see that Braylon Allen got injured early on in the season, so we couldn't see what really that three-headed backfield of Justin Fields, Braylon Allen, and Breece Hall could do. You've got Garrett Wilson. I mean, you've got A.D. Mitchell, I guess. But you've got some weapons for him to work with. You've got an offensive line to protect him. And he should offer you a decent floor and give you the opportunity to save your job this year. And with your 3 first-round draft picks next year, you can make an upgrade. But right now, if you're Aaron Glenn, you are not concerned at all about the 3 first-round draft picks next year. You are concerned about winning this year, and a free agent, Tua Tagovailoa, I think can at least win you enough games to make it so that Glenn looks like he has at least some semblance of competency as a head coach, which he did not show much at all during his rookie season as a head coach. So, he can also throw interceptions at practice and get the defense used to the feeling of interceptions for a team that didn't have any interceptions at all last season. So Tua to the Jets, division rival. In this scenario, Kyler Murray is also available, and I'm going to have Kyler Murray go to, I think, the Cleveland Browns. Todd Monken has spent his career recently working with Lamar Jackson, a running quarterback. Maybe he doesn't want to work with a quarterback that has that ability again. Or a quarterback like Kyler Murray, who had been rumored to not always take his work super seriously, to the point of the Cardinals having to put in a clause about him watching all of his film in one of his contract extensions. Lamar Jackson, there were rumors last year that maybe he wasn't always working 100% of the time to better himself. Maybe Todd Monken doesn't want to deal with the potential of that with Kyler Murray. But I think the Browns need a quarterback. I don't think Shedeur Sanders is going to be a long-term answer there. And I think that they should go and get Kyler Murray and see what that offense can do. I think you give yourself a chance if you can get your offensive line pieces back into place. That's a completely different story, with basically every one of their starters being free agents. But if you can bring a lot of those guys back and still have a decent offensive line, then Kyler Murray can have a chance to get you to a 9-8 season and maybe get you into the playoffs in your first year. Todd Monken is already not the sexiest name on the head coaching cycle from this last year, and is already facing backlash because Jim Schwartz left the team through no fault of Monken's, but just by the virtue of Cleveland hiring Monken over Jim Schwartz, that pissed off Jim Schwartz enough to leave. And so there's probably already some negative feelings associated, whether justifiably or not, towards Todd Monken. So you're going to want to win fans over and make your best case for yourself for not being a guy that everyone at the beginning of the season said, oh, he is clearly one and done. And you want to win some football games, and Kyler Murray, again, is a guy that has won football games, that has been to the postseason, and still has a dynamic skill set, even if it hasn't really shown any consistency since probably 2021. To be honest. So I go Kyler Murray to Cleveland. So that leaves Miami without a quarterback, and Pittsburgh. And I'm going to go to Miami, and they are going to get, they can't afford Malik Willis. Malik Willis is going to be asking for a lot of money. They can't afford that if they have already gotten rid of Tua. Whether they had Tua on the roster or not, they would not be able to afford that within their current cap constraints. So they're not getting Malik Willis. I think they trade back into the first round or just go number 11 and get Ty Simpson, because he can be maybe the better Tua that delivers the football to your playmakers. And I know it's going to be a different offense, so maybe that is just me trying to not moving on from what Mike McDaniel's offense did, which was the short passing game and the running game all mixed together. A diverse and unique run game and a creative run game that was mixed with a short passing game, a quick passing game. But if you want that sort of offense again, I think Ty Simpson provides that. He is the point guard passer. I think he's Brock Purdy with a stronger arm. Crumbles maybe under pressure, but has a little bit more arm strength than I think he gets credit for. So I think Ty Simpson would be a good fit in Miami. Especially since the Dolphins are not one of these teams that has a lot of assets for next season, like the Jets, who have the 3 first-round picks. So for me, Ty Simpson would go to Miami. And what would that mean for Pittsburgh? Well, let's spice things up a bit. The Pittsburgh Steelers put in a phone call to their friends across the state, over by Jersey. Howie, how's it going? There seems to be a lot of issues you guys are facing, specifically with A.J. Brown and the lack of ability to get him the ball. Why don't you think about this? Why don't you keep A.J. Brown and get rid of what could be the other cause of that problem of A.J. Brown not getting the ball enough? And we'll give you a substantial trade package for Jalen Hurts. Do I think that's a realistic idea? I don't know. I probably not. But to spice it up, that's what we're going to do. Pittsburgh trades for Jalen Hurts. The writing has kind of been on the wall a little bit. If you want to really try to overread the tea leaves, the offensive coordinator is a drop-back passer sort of guy. Jalen Hurts, not really a drop-back passer, has been more in the spread shotgun offense throughout his career. They believe in this offensive coordinator, Sean Mannion, so much so that they got rid of their legendary, or they let their legendary offensive line coach walk. So they are going to be committed apparently to this drop-back offense from under center, and that creates kind of a mismatch between the personnel that you have at quarterback and your system. So why not get some assets? Get Jalen Hurts over to Pittsburgh. And there you go. A.J. Brown, happy. Devonta Smith, happy. Saquon Barkley, happy. Well, you want us to have Tanner McKee? I don't think Tanner McKee is a bad idea, but no. Malik Willis goes to the Philadelphia Eagles with his old quarterback coach, Sean Mannion, the true person, perhaps, that revitalized Malik Willis's career. He stays with that successful coordinator and coach and has success with the Philadelphia Eagles right away. So that is Jalen Hurts to Pittsburgh and Malik Willis to Philadelphia to end the quarterback carousel. We'll recap it real quick as we go through all of the teams that in our exercise made changes. The Philadelphia Eagles move on from Jalen Hurts and they bring in Malik Willis. The Minnesota Vikings bring in Geno Smith and have him compete for the starting job with J.J. McCarthy. The Arizona Cardinals lure Aaron Rodgers away from Pittsburgh. Miami makes a shocking trade back up into the first round and gets Ty Simpson. Tua Tagovailoa, after being cut from Miami, goes intra-division, stays intra-division, and goes to the New York Jets. Kyler Murray moves from Arizona to Cleveland. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the beneficiaries of the Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown fallout, and they get Jalen Hurts to pair with Mike McCarthy. Daniel Jones stays in Indianapolis. The Las Vegas Raiders, of course, select Fernando Mendoza with their first overall pick. And that is your quarterback carousel for the 2025-2026 offseason. Let us know where we went right, where we went wrong. Are we a bit too ambitious with the idea that Philadelphia could trade away a quarterback that won them the Super Bowl? Like I said, I don't think it's realistic, but for fun, I wanted to add that to the thought experiment. You can go ahead, leave your comments below. We will be back later on in the week coming back probably Thursday in your feed to discuss whatever news has happened. Maybe some of these quarterbacks are on or off the market. You'll see on the Great Duck NFL Show.